Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling vaping, something that's really taken hold, hasn't it?
It really has.
Especially with younger folks. And it's often seen, as a safer step down from smoking.
That's the perception, yeah.
So you, our listener, flag the transcript of that Kurz Kazak video. Vaping is too good to be true. And that's our jumping off point today.
Right.
Our goal here is to get beyond just the surface chatter, really dig into what the science is currently telling us about vaping.
Exactly. And look, this isn't going to be a simple good or bad verdict.
No.
We're aiming for a more, let's say, nuanced understanding. Exploring what we know, what we think we know, and honestly, what's still a bit of a mystery.
Okay.
Might be a few surprises along the way.
Okay, let's unpack this then. What's the initial draw? Why do people start vaping? The transcript mentions nicotine, obviously.
The core ingredient for many.
And it notes nicotine's potential cognitive pluses, things like better focus, memory, maybe quicker reactions.
There's research suggesting that, yes. And also mood enhancement, stress relief, appetite suppression, things people seek out.
Plus, let's be honest, the transcript touches on the fun aspect too, the novelty.
Definitely. And we have to state this clearly up front, just like the source does. Vaping nicotine is significantly less harmful than smoking traditional cigarettes. That comparison is important.
Huge difference, right? Smoking is inhaling hot smoke, full of incredibly toxic particles, causes immediate widespread damage.
Exactly. Whereas with vaping, you're inhaling an aerosol. Our focus today, just to be clear, is specifically on nicotine vapes, as the transcript lays out.
Okay, so here's where it gets, pretty interesting. Smoking rates, particularly among teens in Western countries, have been going down, thankfully.
That's just great news.
But vaping, it's exploded. The transcript calls it a growing epidemic among teenagers.
The numbers are quite stark when you look at them.
Yeah, the transcript gives specifics. UK, 2023, 20% of children had tried vaping. 20%.
And in the U.S.,
8% of all students vaping regularly. And get this, a quarter of those vape daily. And almost all of them use flavored vapes.
flavors are key, it seems. That's a huge shift in how nicotine is being consumed.
Totally. So this massive uptake, especially among young people. Let's get into the nuts and bolts. How do these things actually work?
Okay, so the basic mechanism, as the transcript explains, is pretty straightforward. You've got a tank holding the liquid.
The vape juice.
Right. Then there's a heating element, usually a metal coil. When you activate the device, the coil heats the liquid and it turns into a mist you inhale.
And what's in that liquid? The transcript mentions propylene glycol and glycerol?
Yep, PG and VG. They're common carriers used in all sorts of things: smoke machines, cosmetics, food, even some industrial uses like paints.
Weird to think about inhaling stuff used in paint.
Well, it's about the form and concentration. Then you add the nicotine, often as nicotine salts, which apparently make it smoother to inhale higher doses.
Ah, okay. And the flavor molecules, of course. The things that make it taste like mango or mint chip or whatever.
Exactly. Those are crucial for the appeal. So when someone takes a puff, the coil heats up. This liquid mix becomes, well, it's often called vapor.
But the transcript says that's not quite right.
Correct. It makes a good point. It's technically an aerosol, a fine mist of tiny liquid particles suspended in air. Not a true gas like water vapor.
Like inhaling a warm, sticky spray. The transcript used an analogy like warm body spray.
That's a decent way to picture it. These billions of tiny aerosol particles coat your mouth, your tongue, that's the flavor delivery, and then they go down into your lungs.
All the way down to the alveoli, those little air sacs.
Right. And that's the crucial interface where the nicotine can quickly pass into your bloodstream and zip up to your brain.
Okay, which leads to the really big question. What exactly are people inhaling?
And here's where the transcript highlights a major issue. We often don't fully know. There's a concerning lack of comprehensive knowledge and regulation.
How so?
Studies have found thousands of different chemical mixes in these liquids. Many substances aren't even listed on the label.
Seriously? Thousands? That's wild. We're breathing this stuff in and we don't even have a full ingredient list.
It's a significant gap. The transcript notes that many listed ingredients like the PG and VG are considered kinda safe because they're used in food or cosmetics. They've been tested for those uses.
But inhaling is different.
Completely different. Your lungs aren't your stomach or your skin. How your body processes something inhaled is vastly different from ingesting it or putting it on your skin.
The transcript gives examples, right?
It does. Cinnamaldehyde, that's the cinnamon flavor. When inhaled, studies show it can kill cells, even cause genetic damage.
Wow.
And benzaldehyde gives those almond or fruity cherry berry type flavors. As a gas, it's known to irritate the respiratory tract.
So even ingredients that sound harmless, like cinnamon flavor, might not be when you heat them up and breathe them in.
Precisely. And the heating process itself adds another layer of complexity. The transcript stresses we don't really know what happens to all these chemicals when they hit that hot coil.
It can change.
They can break down, combine, form entirely new compounds. And the effects of those new compounds, largely unknown.
And if it gets too hot, like that burnt taste people sometimes get.
That's a warning sign. The transcript mentions if the PG and glycerol overheat, maybe the vape's running low or the coil's faulty, they can decompose into some nasty molecules. Definitely time to stop if you taste that.
Okay, so unknown chemical reactions. What else? Metals.
Yes, that heating coil. It's metal. And the transcript details how heating it releases microscopic metal particles right into that aerosol you inhale.
What kind of metals were we talking about?
Studies found quite a list. Aluminum, boron, calcium, iron, copper, magnesium, zinc, but also lead, chromium, nickel, manganese.
Lead, nickel. Those sound bad.
They're not great for your lungs. Short term, these metals can cause irritation, bronchitis symptoms, shortness of breath. Long term, well, nickel is a known carcinogen when inhaled.
So you've got the base liquid, the nicotine, the flavors, potentially unknown breakdown products, and metal particles.
It's a chemical cocktail, as you said earlier. And the transcript rightly points out how all these things interact with each other inside your lungs. That's another big unknown.
It really feels like a huge, uncontrolled experiment.
It's a sobering thought, which brings us squarely to the health effects.
Right. The big question, what does it actually do to us?
And the transcript hits the main challenge immediately. The lack of long-term data. Vaping, in its current popular form, is maybe 10, 15 years old. That's just not long enough for decades-long studies.
Like we have for smoking.
Exactly. Plus, a lot of human studies involve smokers who switch to vaping.
Which is good for them, presumably.
Absolutely. The evidence is pretty clear. For a smoker, switching completely to vaping significantly reduces their exposure to many harmful toxicants. It's harm reduction.
But that makes it hard to study the effects on someone who never smoked, then started vaping.
It does. It muddies the water trying to isolate vaping-specific effects on otherwise healthy lungs.
Okay, so what do we know about effects, especially for non-smokers who vape? The transcript mentions short-term stuff.
Yes. Coughing, producing extra mucus, shortness of breath, wheezing, sometimes throat or chest pain. These are reported fairly commonly, even in non-smokers who vape.
And long-term, that's the big unknown.
Largely, yes. The transcript mentions a big study that started in 2024, specifically looking at non-smokers who vape.
But getting conclusive results from that, it's going to take years, many years.
So for now, it's more about educated guesses based on what's in the aerosol.
Pretty much. The transcript suggests some reasonable assumptions. Our lungs are delicate, designed for air. Inhaling this aerosol mist, chemicals, metals, flavorings likely triggers an immune response.
Inflammation.
Inflammation, maybe fluid buildup, extra mucus production as the lungs try to protect themselves and clear things out, and potentially, over time, actual damage to the lung cells themselves.
Does it affect the rest of the body too? Or just the lungs? Good question. The transcript touches on potential systemic effects. Things like increased heart rate, higher blood pressure, possibly lower blood oxygen levels.
Stiffer blood vessels, clogged arteries.
Those are potential concerns mentioned. Stiffening or clogging of blood vessels. Also, something called oxidative stress, which is this general bodily process linked to lots of chronic diseases down the line.
So the big worry is whether these short-term changes eventually lead to serious stuff like strokes, heart disease, lung disease, cancer.
That's the multi-million-dollar question, isn't it? And right now, as the transcript makes clear, especially for non-smokers, the answer is still basically, we don't know for sure. The risk is likely much lower than smoking, but lower risk doesn't mean no risk.
Okay, let's shift to the nicotine itself. The transcript really hammers this point. Vapes are incredibly efficient nicotine delivery devices.
They really are. Way more so than cigarettes in some ways. It's often less harsh to inhale. There's no smoke smell clinging to you. You can do it almost anywhere, constantly.
So people can end up consuming huge amounts.
Easily. The transcript mentions people going through a whole vape pod or disposable in a day. That's just showering the brain in nicotine, potentially much higher doses than they'd get from cigarettes. And those nicotine salts we mentioned, they allow smoother inhalation of higher concentrations.
Making it easier to get hooked, faster.
That's the concern, especially for teenagers. Their brains are still developing, right? And the transcript points out their nicotine receptors are particularly active and tied into the reward system, self-perception.
So nicotine could actually interfere with that development.
Potentially, yes. Overstimulating those receptors might alter how the brain wires itself. The transcript mentions links being explored between teen nicotine use and issues later on: cognitive problems, hyperactivity, impulse control, attention deficits, mood disorders.
But it also mentions the chicken and egg thing.
Right. It's hard to untangle cause and effect sometimes. Are teens with these tendencies more likely to start vaping, or does vaping contribute to these issues? Probably a bit of both, interacting in complex ways.
What about the idea of vaping being a gateway to other drugs?
The transcript says that theory is largely rejected by scientists now. It's more likely that kids who are prone to risk-taking might try vaping and other substances, rather than vaping causing them to seek out other drugs.
Okay. But the addiction to nicotine itself is definitely real.
Oh, absolutely. The science on nicotine addiction is rock solid. And the withdrawal. The transcript lists the symptoms, and they're rough.
Edginess, cravings.
Intense cravings, mood swings, anxiety, sleep problems, fatigue, headaches, trouble concentrating.
Reduced sense of pleasure, worsening depression, increased appetite, weight gain. Sounds awful.
It really underscores nicotine's power, and anyone who's tried quitting smoking or vaping knows how real that is.
And it's not just physical, right? The transcript mentioned the habit.
Exactly. There's strong psychological addiction too. Vaping becomes woven into your daily routine, your coping mechanisms. It's a habit that's hard to break.
Is there any good news on the withdrawal front?
Yes. The transcript notes it is reversible. Nicotine leaves the body relatively quickly, within about 72 hours usually. The worst physical withdrawal symptoms tend to fade within a few weeks. The psychological craving can last longer, but it does get easier.
So, circling back to that Kurzgesagt title, too good to be true.
It sounds like the transcript lands on maybe.
I think that's fair. It acknowledges the appeal. The flavors seems cleaner, the nicotine effects, but it highlights the core issue. Vaping is really good at delivering addictive nicotine, maybe even better than cigarettes for some people.
So while switching from smoking is a win,
A definite positive step for individual health, yes.
the big worry is hooking a whole new generation on nicotine. And that's a huge public health problem.
Exactly. Does the initial appeal, the feeling that it's better or even beneficial, mask the unknowns and the very known risk of addiction? That seems to be the central tension.
The transcript also had an interesting point about just trying to scare kids away from it. Right. It suggests that might not be very effective. If someone's already addicted, nicotine might feel like their stress relief. Telling them it's bad just adds more stress.
Which could make them want to vape more. A real catch-22.
Yeah. And the transcript basically argues that vaping, with its flavors and ease of use, has cleverly repackaged an addictive drug that was actually declining in popularity, making it super attractive again, especially to teens.
But because it's relatively new, there's still a chance to address it.
That's the hopeful note it strikes. We're not decades into this like we were with smoking when the big health crises hit. There's maybe still time to change the trajectory.
Which requires good information. The transcript touches on navigating all the headlines online.
Yeah, it mentions how hard it can be when scary or sensational stuff gets amplified. It references ground news as one tool people might use to compare coverage from different sources, get a wider perspective.
Like how different outlets covered a UK study versus the FDA authorizing some vape products, seeing both sides.
Exactly. The main point being, seek out balanced information to make informed health decisions. Don't just react to the loudest headline.
Well, this has certainly been quite the deep dive. It really highlights how complex vaping is.
It really is.
The evidence seems strong. For smokers, switching is way less harmful, but it's also crystal clear. Vaping isn't risk-free, especially if you never smoked, and especially for teenagers.
The addiction potential and the questions around brain development are serious concerns there.
Which really leaves us with a final thought for you, the listener, to ponder. Considering how fast vaping tech and flavors are evolving,
It changes constantly.
what ethical responsibilities do manufacturers and regulators actually have here to ensure public health, especially for young people?
It's a huge question. How do you balance individual choice against the need to protect society, particularly when you have these potentially addictive products where the long-term picture is still, well, pretty hazy?
Lots to think about there. A complex landscape indeed.